Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Healthy for Life. My name is Tim McCoy. I'm the chief cook, bottle washer, manager of the store, health coach. I do a lot of things around here. We put on these events for the public to help introduce you to practitioners and people that have health as the main thing that they are focused upon. And we try to introduce as many because Rachel and I were talking earlier, there are not a ton of functional medicine or what I would call root cause practitioners in central Iowa. So having one and having people that we can refer people to is a wonderful thing. And so that's why we do what we do here in these events, and Dr. Nish and Dr. Buchkina and Rachel. So Rachel is a doctor of chiropractic, and she is trained at the Institute of Functional Medicine, which I know a few people from out of the state that have gone through that program, and it's a wonderful program. And Rachel's going to talk about gut health, which is the people that I talk to is one of the ones that are up there, like top 3 of issues that people deal with, getting their microbiome. Robert Lustig's book, Metabolical, says 2 things. The mantra of the book is protect the liver and feed the gut. And that kind of solves a lot of the problems that we have with what we would call chronic lifestyle diseases. So without further ado, Rachel, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
You betcha.
Yeah, excited to be here, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and taking time out of your night to spend it with me and learn about all things gut health. So I am Dr. Rachel Wanninger. I'm a functional medicine doctor, like he said. I practice out at Delta Health. It's in Clive. We have some chiropractors, some massage therapists, and then I am the functional medicine doctor there. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Johnston. Most of my life was focused around soccer, and that led me to playing collegiate soccer at Drake. And I don't tell you that because I can't hang up the cleats, but because that's how I was introduced to functional medicine and when it really changed my life. So I had a lot of fatigue issues when it came to soccer specifically. Couldn't run anymore. Went to several doctors, didn't get any answers, tried different medications, nothing worked, some things got worse, and then eventually was led to a functional medicine doctor. And within a few weeks, I had answers, I had a plan, I had a path towards healing, and the following season I remember coming off the field practically in tears because I was able to run again, and it was very life-changing for me. And all the while I had definitely GI issues, but it wasn't my main complaint at the time. But going through the whole process, I really was able to heal my GI tract as well. And that was a definite added bonus. And at that time, I wanted to be a chiropractor. I loved athletes, I loved movement, I loved the holistic route of everything. But once I discovered functional medicine for myself, I knew that's the coolest thing there is. Why is everybody not doing this? Why are we not helping people find the root cause of their problems and then really helping them heal, from the ground up and from the inside out? So went to chiropractic school because I knew I could get the functional medicine certification that route and was able to study in both at the same time. So I went to Cleveland down in Kansas City and then studied through the Institute for Functional Medicine like Tim mentioned. And then, that leads me to where I am today at Delta Health, and I love it there. Lots of great people. Okay, why you are all here, the GI tract. So lots of people think that when you eat food in your mouth and it digests and it comes out the other end, that's as simple as it gets, that's what it does, and it all works well. And that's true, but it's a lot more complex than that. Our digestive system is full of different processes, different enzymes involved, and it's much more complex than we think about it. Lots of different areas for breakdown. And then on top of that, our GI tract does a lot more, and it's in charge of a lot more. So first and foremost, like we kind of talked about, digestion. So it starts in the mouth. We need to chew enough, and we need to chew our food for that digestion process to start. And then we move our way down into the stomach, and our stomach acid is kind of the most important part when it comes to our stomach. And poor stomach acid is villainized. Everybody talks about suppressing it, especially when it comes to heartburn and reflux and those different things. And so our answer for that a lot of times is a PPI or an antacid, whatever it might be. But lots of times it's actually a low stomach acid issue and not actually an excess of stomach acid. So that is an issue, and then on top of that, we need our stomach acid for one, B12 absorption, and B12 is one of our most important vitamins that our body needs, and we also need it for protein breakdown. Without stomach acid, we cannot break down protein, and protein is the basic building block of almost everything in our body. So missing out on the protein and the protein absorption will have all kinds of different consequences. Our pancreas is in charge of secreting digestive enzymes. Lots of times when we hear pancreas, we think of type 1 diabetes and insulin regulation, but it also has a major digestive component as well. Small intestine also has to secrete digestive enzymes too. And then along with the digestion comes absorption, and something to really mention with that is we have to be in a rest and digest state in order to digest our food. People are so chronically in fight or flight that we don't actually get into that spot where we are able to rest and digest. So how many of us are sitting down, just focusing on the fact that we're eating, taking a deep breath before we eat, smelling our food and chewing our food enough? We're not eating on the go, we're not eating in a car, watching the news, scrolling through Twitter, whatever it is, all those things that really keep us in a fight or flight state rather than a rest state. So if we aren't in that state, we can't digest like it's called rest and digest. Barrier and immune system is going to be a lot what we talk about today, but if you think about it, the tube that starts in our mouth and ends at the other end is all the outside world. And then once you pass over that GI lining, past the GI intestinal tract, we've now entered the inside world, or us. So that intestinal lining is the barrier between the outside world and the inside world. Because of that, 70% of our immune system is actually housed in our GI tract. And it seems like a lot, but it makes sense when you think about the fact that everything that enters our body has to go past that GI tract lining. So it needs to be there to decide what is friend and what is foe. So a large portion of our immune system is down there. Second, brain. We all hear, have this gut feeling, or my gut's telling me to do this, and I kind of wonder probably where that comes from. And that is because we have a large percentage of our nervous system in our GI tract. It is our second brain. It has its own name. It's called the enteric nervous system, and it's a complex neurological system that's housed in our GI tract. So it controls blood flow, motility, secretions, and then also it plays a big role in our neurotransmitters. So when we hear serotonin or GABA or dopamine, we think brain, but 90% of our serotonin is actually made in our GI tract. And 40 to 60% of GABA and dopamine is made in the GI tract as well. So large percentage of our neurological tissue and processes happen in the GI tract. And there's a big communication between the brain and the gut, big connection. You might have heard that, the brain-gut connection. It's very real. So lots of times when we see gut dysfunction, that leads to brain dysfunction and vice versa. Everyone knows how it is. You get really stressed out. Sometimes you have to go to the bathroom. There's that connection there. And it goes both ways. And lots of times it's happening through our vagus nerve. So if you never heard of that, it's one of our main cranial nerves, goes from the brain down into our abdomen, and controls a lot of our GI tract. So lots of communication back and forth there. Detoxification and excretion. Again, we think of liver when it comes to detoxing, and that's very true. But our GI tract is very, very vital in proper detoxification as well. So daily bowel movements, of course, are healthy, and that's what we want to aim for, because we need to get rid of toxins, excess waste, dead cells, whatever we're trying to get rid of that we digested and don't need. But if we don't have those daily bowel movements and we aren't getting rid of things, then the toxins sit in there, the hormones will sit in there, and they can recirculate. So that can lead to excess toxicity or excess estrogen in the body and lead to estrogen dominance is kind of the word that people hear a lot. So then hormone balance goes right into that detoxification. When we have hormones, we use them, but they're supposed to leave when we're done with them. And if they do not, they can recirculate and lead to hormone issues. The microbiome is last on here, but it is probably one of the most important ones. And if you haven't heard of the microbiome, it's this vast, super important ecosystem that's largely found in the large intestine. It consists of bacteria, viruses, parasites, and fungi, and our health is dependent on it, or gut health is dependent on it. And it's in charge of so many different things. They produce vitamins. They manage our intestinal lining as well. They'll lower inflammation, but even control metabolism, all kinds of different things that the microbiome is in charge of. and it is absolutely vital to, excuse me, whole body health. Okay. So next few slides are going to be about leaky gut. I don't know if you've ever heard the term. Intestinal permeability is the more scientific term for it. Leaky gut is definitely more fun, but I wanted to give you kind of a visual of what it looks like before I dive into the causes of it and the consequences of it. So leaky gut is at the root, like we talked about root cause medicine. And it's really at the root of a lot of our GI issues, but then also full body issues. So I'll dive into that, but just a little visual. So I talked about a layer of cells that separates the outside world from the inside world. And that would be what we're kind of looking at in this picture. So those pink rectangles with teeth-looking things coming off of them are actually your intestinal cells. And if you can tell there's only one single layer of them. So one single layer of cells separates outside world from inside world, which seems kind of crazy. Why are we not building up that lining and making it really hard to get through? But we need vitamins, we need the minerals, we need the proteins to get through. But because it is a single layer of cell, it's easy and more prone to break down. So a good visualization that I like to use with patients is kind of your fingertips. So your intestinal cells should be like this, nice and locked. Things should be able to get through. But for various reasons that we'll go over in the next slide, you can start to see breakdown happen. And now we see that there's gaps in between, there's holes in between, microscopic holes, and things that aren't supposed to be going through, which you can kind of see there on the right side, are coming through. And since we have a large chunk of our immune system on that other side, ready to go, then we can have an immune system response, and that can lead to inflammation, chronic inflammation, and all sorts of gut issues as well as full body issues. Okay, so on the left, we have causes of leaky gut or intestinal permeability, and on the right side, we have consequences of it. So starting from the top with the causes, the standard American diet is going to be our biggest culprit when it comes to leaky gut. So abbreviated SAD for a reason, full of processed foods, processed carbohydrates, sugar, food additives, food chemicals, food dyes. All those are kind of our biggest hitters when it comes to our culture and our food, unfortunately. Gluten is also very inflammatory to the gut and can cause leaky gut. Conventional dairy and can be very processed, and then the full hormones as well. So that's at the top for a reason. It seems to be the biggest hitter when it comes to leaky gut causing, gut issue causing. Medications and antibiotics. So antibiotics are probably the biggest medication causing gut issues. We take antibiotics for a reason. We want to get rid of the bad bacteria, whatever that is, whatever the infection is. But when we take the antibiotics, they will wipe out the good as well. So it'll take out a lot of that microbiome and take out the good bacteria that we need. That can lead to leaky gut, as well as a whole host of issues once you start really messing with the microbiome. Other medications that are shown in the literature to cause leaky gut, NSAIDs like ibuprofen, other opioids, birth control pills, metformin, which is a diabetes medication, and then the PPIs, proton pump inhibitors, and antacid type medications. Infections, a little bit more self-explanatory. If we have an infection in our gut, it's going to cause an immune response. And in the short term or in the acute phase, that's wonderful. We need our immune system to fight the infection or to heal the sprained ankle, whatever it is. And inflammation short term is lovely, but once it stays chronic, that's when we start to see a whole host of issues arise. So if there's a chronic infection in the gut and we're constantly attacking it, that leads to chronic inflammation, which can lead to intestinal permeability. Stress, a little bit more abstract, but there is lots of research showing what stress does to the microbiome. Stress to the brain leads to a suppression and the growth of our beneficial bacteria, and then stress will also lead to a growth of the negative or the bad guys, the bad bacteria in our gut. That's getting research for sure. Alcohol, don't have to explain that it's not very good for you and has been shown in the research to be damaging to the microbiome and to the intestinal lining. Toxins and pollutants, same kind of idea. Of course, toxins are not good. The more that comes in with the food that we eat, the processed foods or the herbicides and the pesticides and all those different things, but then also what we're putting on our skin, what we're using to clean, all those different things have toxins and chemicals in them as well. And our skin does absorb everything. So those are our real main leaky gut causers. And then there on the right is going to be the consequences, or what happens subsequently after that intestinal permeability arises. So systemic inflammation at the top for good reason as well. So like I've mentioned, when we have that leaky gut process and things are coming through that are not supposed to be coming through, the immune system sees that. Those are foreign. We need to get rid of them. Attack, attack, attack. That causes an immune response. That causes local inflammation. And whenever we have local inflammation, that leads to chronic inflammation or widespread inflammation. And if that inflammation is chronic, that's going to lead to chronic widespread inflammation. And that's really the basis of almost everything chronic. Chronic disease, chronic symptoms is chronic inflammation at the root. So GI specifically, if that's where that inflammation is happening, we're absolutely going to have GI symptoms and GI issues, but it can lead to whole body chronic disease as well. Food intolerances. So if we have broccoli coming through the intestinal lining or undigested chicken, whatever it may be, that's coming through the intestinal lining isn't supposed to be our body again. That's not supposed to be here. We're going to attack it. And they'll build an antibody response to that. So every time you eat broccoli, every time you eat chicken, it's going to attack it. And that's what will lead to kind of the food sensitivity symptoms. I'll talk more about food sensitivity and food intolerance testing a little bit later, because I have my opinions on that. And autoimmunity, kind of similar idea. So if certain molecules or certain proteins, again, are coming through that barrier that aren't supposed to be, the immune system's going to attack it, mount that immune response. And oftentimes the proteins that they're attacking or the molecules that they're attacking will look like other proteins or molecules in your body. Thyroid's a great example. So we'll see Hashimoto's, which is a common thyroid autoimmunity, sometimes RA, so issues in the joints, or even psoriasis on the skin. And then also just chronic inflammation can easily trigger that autoimmunity if that's what someone's genetically prone to. So could be more of the mimicry of the molecules or the proteins that they're attacking, but then also chronic inflammation. And then if you combine the two, it's just a perfect storm. Nutrient malabsorption, a little bit more obvious. If you have a breakdown in that barrier, which its main job is to decide, are we going to bring this in or not? It's going to have some issues bringing it in if it's broken down, and nutrient insufficiencies and nutrient deficiencies lead to all kinds of issues because we need all those nutrients to do all the processes in our body. Blood-brain barrier breach. Yeah. So just like our gut is a gatekeeper or a barrier, we have kind of a similar idea around our brain. We have this vascular network called the blood-brain barrier that is, its main job is to make sure that whatever toxins or inflammatory molecules are not supposed to get into the brain do not get into the brain. They stay in the blood flow so that they can be detoxed and then excreted out of the body. And there's research showing that if there's breakdown in the GI lining, we will also see breakdown in that blood-brain barrier. So toxins that are getting into the body are also oftentimes getting into the brain, and that's where we can see a large gut-brain connection as well. So Hippocrates, way back when, got it right. All disease begins with the gut. So signs of gut dysfunction and leaky gut, whatever you want to call it, of course, GI pain, bloating, loose stools, constipation, food sensitivities, heartburn, and reflux type symptoms, of course, are going to be signs of gut dysfunction and are almost, beneficial because that's telling us where the problem is, which is nice. But we also get all kinds of full body issues. Autoimmunity that we've talked about. Allergies and asthma are super common too. So that overactive immune system in the gut leads to overactive immune responses elsewhere. So the tightening of the bronchioles with asthma, or the watery eyes, itchy nose with classic allergy type symptoms, seasonal allergies. That's often a reflection of an overactive immune response happening in the gut as well. Skin issues like acne, eczema, and psoriasis. These are very, very commonly gut issues, especially in kids when we see eczema. Lots of times it's post-antibiotics, so you see the microbiome get all messed up, and then it leads to skin issues like eczema, really common in children, but then also in adults. Acne for sure, lots of times the gut issue or food sensitivity issue, and oftentimes acne is treated with antibiotics, so it's very ironic. Doesn't help solve the problem, but yes, I like to say that your skin is one of your biggest windows into your gut health. So what your skin is doing is often a reflection of your gut. We really focus topically when it comes to skin issues, but usually it's an internal problem that's showing externally. Brain fog, anxiety, depression, we've talked about that gut connection or that gut brain connection. So we can see one leads to the other very commonly. Hormone issues goes back to constipation. We're not getting rid of the hormones when we're done using them. They can recirculate and lead to hormone issues. And then fatigue. With any chronic inflammation comes cortisol, trying to put out the fire, trying to lower inflammation. And if we're doing that chronically, our adrenal glands, which secrete cortisol, will start to poop out, and that can lead to fatigue and energy issues. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about what the functional medicine approach is and what I do in my office for these issues. So, like we kind of mentioned, and Tim mentioned, is functional medicine is very root cause medicine. It's kind of the buzzword that we use, and we really want to help figure out the why behind whatever the disease is, whatever the symptoms are, the symptoms that don't have a diagnosis, whatever it might be. It's all about finding out why. And in order to do that, we need to hear the whole patient history and then look into laboratory testing. So with the history, sit down, hear the patient's story, birth to present. Everything matters in between. Were they on lots of antibiotics? Did they have a long history of the PPIs, the proton pump inhibitors for acid reflux or excess stomach acid? Were they born C-section or vaginally? Were they chronically stressed all of their life? What's their diet look like now? What did it look like in the past? All those things are really important. And then, of course, hearing the patient's symptoms can give us great clues into where is dysfunction coming from. You know, if there's, for example, if there's lots of bloating, lots of times that can be an overgrowth problem in the microbiome. And if there's a reflux issue, lots of times we see, again, it's not too much acid, it's too little acid, and so there's a whole different approach to that. So, of course, symptoms matter as well. And then the other side of figuring out the why would be testing. So I need to see what's going on at a biochemical level or a molecular level. And majority of the time with my patients, I do a big comprehensive blood panel. So look at all kinds of different blood markers to really look wide lens view into the patient. Where do we see dysfunction coming from? You know, what's kind of our biggest issue? How does the rest of the blood panel fall around that? How does it relate to it? How does it relate to the patient's symptoms, the patient's diagnosis, and their history, and all those different things? So we test a lot. We use different optimal ranges to really look and see where healthy people actually fall. And then we will also, the way we approach it is very much like a puzzle. So what's the blood work telling us, and how does that relate to everything in between? And then with GI issues, it's common to do a stool test, sometimes by itself, sometimes paired with a blood panel. It totally depends on the patient. Everything that I do in functional medicine's idea is to be very individualized to the patient. So there's not always a one protocol for everybody. It totally depends on the patient and what their history is, what their symptoms are, and then, of course, what labs we do and what the labs say. So, stool test, one of my favorite tests. I know it sounds slowly. It is full of information. They're very comprehensive. They're very eye-opening into everything that's going on in the GI tract. So the stool tests are really break down digestion and absorption. Is our pancreas secreting the enzymes that it's supposed to? Are we breaking down fat? Are we breaking down protein? What's the immune system look like in our gut? How much inflammation do we have? Do we have pathogenic bacteria? Do we have parasites? Do we have a yeast overgrowth? Do we have enough short-chain fatty acids? Okay, but we'll talk about this later. But also, it'll break down the microbiome in a really cool format. So we have to look at the microbiome to really see, is there enough diversity? Do we have enough good guys? Do we have too many bad guys? Is it more of an overgrowth problem? Is it an undergrowth problem? Is there diversity? All those things matter. The microbiome, of course, is very complex and complicated. And I forgot to mention earlier when we were talking about the microbiome that the number of bacteria in our gut actually outnumber the cells in our body. So you could even argue that we are more bacteria than we are human. Their genome is 100 times bigger than ours, so their genetic makeup is 100 times bigger than ours, which is a very, very large amount. So we know a lot about the microbiome, but clearly there's a lot to learn, and it's a very amazing field, and I'm excited to see where it is. Food sensitivity testing. So Really common, lots of people do them on their own. I have lots of patients that come to me and have done them prior to seeing me, and it's lots of times it's, well, they didn't really help, or it came back with a lot of foods that I don't even eat. And the research on the testing is actually pretty mixed. Some of it supports its validity, and then others do not. So it's not a gold standard by any means in the research. And my thought process and functional medicine thought process is, well, why do we have food sensitivities in the first place? We shouldn't attack broccoli when it comes in. We shouldn't attack chicken when it comes in. So we have to think back, well, why do we have those in the first place? And that goes back to the leaky gut process and, some sort of gut dysfunction that we need to focus on. So taking away certain foods short term can be helpful, especially if they're having a major immune response to it. But it's not the end all be all, and it doesn't usually, first of all, heal the root cause or fix their problem. So it can be used in certain scenarios, but I don't always start with it, and it's not the go-to by any means. Okay, so then the 5R approach is about really healing the body. So what I'm going to mention here, and then the next few slides are going to be about things that you can do when you leave that would help heal the GI tract, and very broad and general things that would help the GI tract, but I just always want to mention that this would all be tailored to the patient's history and to their stool test results and to their blood panel results. So everything is tailored specifically to the patient and what those results say. But a lot of these things are great general information for people to work on. So the 5R approach, something so we focus on with removing. Do we need to remove inflammatory foods? Do we need to remove pathogenic bacteria or parasites that we have? Do we need to remove certain food sensitivities if that's around that we don't? Replace. Do we need to add in digestive enzymes? Did the stool test reveal that the pancreas isn't secreting enough enzymes to help us break down our food? Do we need to replace with anti-inflammatory foods? Reinoculate. Do we need to add those bacteria back into our microbiome? So do we need probiotics? Do we need supplements? Do we need the food? Do we need to have the food that feeds the bacteria in our stomach? Repair. So of course, if we have a leaky gut process, we need to repair that leaky gut process. And there's all kinds of supplement combinations that are really full of different herbs and amino acids that help repair that gut lining that the research supports. And then lots of different foods and a few drinks that I will mention in the coming slides. Rebalance. So the first four there really focused on the gut, but that last one is focused on rebalancing the body. So stress management is a big portion of that. We talked about that gut brain protection. We're chronically stressed. That will hinder the ability to rest, digest, and heal. So we need to be able to bring our sympathetic nervous system down every once in a while throughout the day. Of course, when we're eating, but then also just in general. Okay. So how do we heal the gut? Diet is going to be the first and foremost and most important way to heal the GI tract. So focusing, kind of talked about it a little bit with the SAD diet there, but really focusing on eliminating processed foods, processed carbohydrates, foods with different additives, preservatives, dyes, colors, sugar. Sugar is a big culprit. It's been shown in the research to be inflammatory and break down the gut lining. Getting rid of gluten. I know it's lots of yummy things are made with gluten, but it is inflammatory for everyone, even if there's not a celiac issue or a gluten sensitivity. There's research showing that it does cause inflammation in the gut. Conventional dairy, I kind of mentioned also. So not all dairy is bad. It's really based on the health of the animal, and same with meat, which I'll talk about in just a second. And then we really focus a lot of times on just what should we remove, but we also need to focus on what we should add in. So we need to add the foods that are going to heal the GI tract as well. And eating the rainbow is a great place to start. So all the different colors in our food give us different antioxidants, different polyphenols, all those fancy words that pretty much mean inflammation fighting and age fighting, anti-cancer, and all those different things. So food is medicine. Food is not just calories in, calories out. It speaks to our DNA, decides to turn on inflammatory genes, or it tells the genes to turn on anti-inflammatory genes. And then when it comes to protein, I'm a big fan of the grass-fed meat and the pasture-raised organic meats. They have a completely different nutrient profile than more of our conventionally raised animals. So you think about it, if the animal is living off the land the way it was supposed to and it's eating plants, then they're going to have healthier meat and healthier dairy products if that's something that they produce. Omega-3s. So this kind of goes into, we need those healthy fats as well. And we can get those from, of course, healthy oils like olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, walnut oil. Those are great sources of healthy fats. So are all our nuts and our seeds. And then you can get great omega-3s and essential fatty acids from grass-fed meats and pasture-raised meats and things like that. More of those inflammatory oils, such as vegetable oils like canola oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, oil. Those are a lot more of our inflammatory oils. They're higher in omega-6s, and in general, our omega-6 essential fatty acids are more inflammatory. So the omega-3s, more anti-inflammatory and more of our gut healers. Healthy for Life has a great product for omega-3s, so that would be a great benefit, but you can also get it in your food as well. Vitamin D, we know lots of times comes from the sun. There are a few food sources of it, but our sun is the best source. Great for gut healing, great for immune regulation, and just really important for full body health. A lot of the COVID research has showed us just how important that is. We know, but now the rest of the world is starting to know, which is great. Vitamin A is a good mucosal surface vitamin. So when you think of mucus surface, lungs and throat, mouth, eyes, nose, but then also our gut is a huge mucus surface. So vitamin A is really, really good for gut healing as well. Vitamin A comes from mostly animal products, but oftentimes people think of vitamin A, they think of carrots, and that orange color, that's beta carotene, and beta carotene has to get converted into vitamin A in order for it to be vitamin A. So that's oftentimes what you hear with carrots and those orange and yellow foods. So if the beta carotene gets converted, that can be a great source of vitamin A as well. Zinc, great immune system regulator. As we know, our immune system is very heavy in our GI tract. So animal product heavy, it's found in a lot of different foods. Glutamine is an amino acid that I'll talk a little bit about later on. And I like to mention if you're going to take supplements, it's always good to talk to a health professional before you do that, especially if there's lots of medications involved. Okay, prebiotics and probiotics. So for those that don't know, probiotics are the bacteria and prebiotics are the food that feed the bacteria. So prebiotics feed the probiotics. And a large percentage of prebiotics come from fiber. So all kinds of vegetables are full of fiber. Lots of fruits are full of fiber. More commonly we hear them with whole grains and things like that, but our vegetables, starchy and non-starchy, are full of fiber as well. Different legumes, rice, peas, beans, those are all full of fiber as well. So of course we know fiber is great for bowel movements, and that's what we hear about it a lot. But what it actually does is feed the bacteria in our microbiome as well. So we have this really cool symbiotic relationship with them, where when we eat fiber, the bacteria will digest that fiber itself and then give off something called short chain fatty acids, which I mentioned earlier. I got one myself. And short chain fatty acids are the main fuel source for our intestinal cells. So we feed the bacteria to then give energy to our intestinal cells to do the things that they're supposed to do. So it's very fascinating that we have this relationship with them, and it's super, super critical. Probiotics, one of my favorite topics. So probiotic supplements are very, very popular because there is all kinds of research that supports their benefits: lowering inflammation, decreasing cancer risk, decreasing diabetes risk, intestinal lining health, all kinds of things. That's not just gut health, but full body health. And that's true. Probiotics are wonderful and definitely speaks to the importance of the bacteria in our gut. But because they are popular, they are taken advantage of, just like a lot of supplements, but probiotics are really up there. And so there's a study done where it looked at 7 different probiotic supplements, and only 3 of those 7 supplements contained what they actually said they contained. So lots of times things are getting put into supplements that aren't actually what they say they're putting into it. So it's always important, if you're going to get a supplement, and probiotic especially, to look for a health store to get them from, like a Campbell's for a Whole Foods or natural grocers, they're going to have brands that are more trustworthy, getting third-party tested. And usually if a supplement is very cheap, it is cheap for a reason. Probiotics is a great example of that. But my preferred way of getting probiotics is in your food and in your diet. So things like sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, yogurt, and then kombucha is another good one. That's more of a drink. And then miso and tempeh are other two, but not as commonly thought about. Those are the best way to get your probiotics into your gut. So the probiotic supplements seem to have more of a transient, short-term usage in the gut. So they kind of come in, kind of get a lay of the land, kind of say, this is the state you want to be in, and then they leave. And then the probiotic foods tend to be more, they come in, they stay, and they help build that microbiome. So probiotic foods are definitely a better option when it comes to rebuilding the microbiome and maintaining a healthy microbiome. I have patients with GI issues aim for 1 to 2 servings a day. That's great for anybody and anybody to aim for, but especially with my GI issues or my autoimmunities, and someone that seems to have that leaky gut process. Probiotic foods is one of my favorite go-to gut healing foods all across the board, whether it's a stomach issue like reflux or even lower intestinal issues as well. And like it says at the bottom, to date, only dietary changes and stool transplant have been shown to actually change the microbiome of the gut. So stool transplants are very new, and it's not really a commercial thing yet. It'll be interesting to see where those head. But while they're working on that, dietary changes are the best way that we can actually influence and change our microbiome. So all the things that we mentioned in the previous slide, and then the fiber/prebiotics, and then the probiotic fermented foods. Okay, my other favorite gut healers is bone broth. So like I mentioned glutamine earlier, that amino acid is very, very prominent in bone broth. And our intestinal cells love glutamine. When they take in glutamine, for lack of better words, they spit out mucus. And in this case, mucus is good. It's going to help seal the lining of the gut and really tighten up the tight junctions between those intestinal cells. So very, very helpful for healing leaky gut and anything GI. Collagen, not as much research on collagen, but anecdotally I've seen it work well and people have liked it. And if you think about it, it really makes sense because collagen is what holds our cells together. So if we want to get those cells holding back together, it's a great addition for sure.
We need to get back to doing more bone broth.
And then of course, full body healing is important for gut healing. So stress management is going to be number one. We've talked about it a few times. That brain-gut connection is huge. If we want to heal and we want to digest, we have to be in a healing and digesting state. We cannot be in a chronically fight or flight state. So deep breathing throughout the day, deep breathing breaks are helpful, just 2 minutes, every few hours or something like that. Yoga is wonderful. Meditation is even better. Deep breathing while you're stretching, reading a book at night before you go to bed while deep breathing, all those different things are really going to help bring down heart rate and bring down the sympathetics. So it doesn't have to be this extravagant 45-minute meditation twice a day that is the only way you can reap the benefits. There's so much research on just 5-10 minutes a day of meditation or deep breathing that actually has impacts on our nervous system and on healing our body and lowering inflammation. So usually people can find 5 minutes to really focus on their breath, deep belly breathing, exhales being nice and long. That's what's going to bring down our heart rate. And especially is important before bed because that's what allows us to fall into deep sleep is when our heart rate is low enough. Healthy lifestyle, this could be all kinds of things. Of course, exercise is important for lowering inflammation, but then kind of to reiterate the point earlier of the toxins, everything that we take in that's toxic, whether it be, in our processed foods or the herbicides and pesticides on our food or what we're putting on our skin, what we're cleaning with, all those different chemicals do get into our body and cause inflammation and make it harder for our detox systems to work, and that can lead to gut issues and chronic inflammation as well. Sunlight, of course, we get our vitamin D from the sun. The sun is not evil. Please do not avoid it at all costs. 10, 20, 30 minutes of sunlight a day, depending on your skin, of course. is great and is necessary. So get that vitamin D, but then also sunlight is great for sleep management as well. So if we can see sunlight in the morning, we can have better sleep at night. So that light that we bring in will trigger serotonin production. Serotonin gets changed into melatonin as the day goes on, and that helps you fall asleep. So what you do in the morning has an impact on what happens at night too. So that's about it. My resources. And then I always like to mention, I offer anyone that comes through the door a free 20-minute introductory discovery type visit. That way you can kind of sit down, give a little review of what you have going on, and I can answer whatever questions you have. What does the process look like? What is functional medicine? We can dive into that even more, and it just really allows people to decide if that's what the route they want to go. Okay, yes, go ahead.
Question. Okay, so you say deep breathing.
Mhm.
Inhale through the nose or the mouth and then vice versa?
So inhaling through the nose
Okay.
would be preferred. Exhaling, they say through the mouth or nose. Either really works. Sometimes it's just up to comfort. And it might kind of depend on what yoga technique you're doing or what breathing technique you're doing, but always through the nose. Yeah. Our mouth is meant for eating and our nose is meant for breathing. So
Sunlight.
Mhm.
Just like go out for a 15-minute walk in the morning or lay it out in a lawn chair or?
So if you want the vitamin D, of course, that would be the skin contact of, whatever way you want to do it, laying out in your backyard.
Okay.
But yeah, just the sunlight in your eyes is ideal if you can't get outside, when winter comes. And you can sit in your window and get the sunlight, that would be kind of the next best. And then sometimes there's not sunlight until like 8 a.m. and people use those happy lights. That would be great for the sleep regulation and the serotonin to melatonin trigger. And then worst case scenario, make your house very bright in the morning. And then of course the opposite at nighttime. You want to dim the lights. Yeah, good question.
Can you just go back the last slide?
If you have a good C-reactive protein reading, is that an indicator that you've got a healthy gut, or is it?
The inflammation marker, yeah. So she's asking about an inflammation marker. And if that is normal, does that mean you're leaky gut? You probably don't have leaky gut. Is that what you're asking? Not necessarily. So the stool test, you can test for a protein that would signify leaky gut, and that would be our best indicator. But no, not all the time. Can't rule it out. Nope. Yeah.
Do you back to like 2 years since that COVID? Have you had anything that have been expected?
Yep, seen both. Yep.
My experience is always.
Right, yep. And if there's some sort of overactive immune response to whatever it is, a virus or a vaccine, doesn't make a difference to me. If you're having that overactive immune response, how do we combat that and how do we calm it down and really regulate it? Yeah. Yeah, it's real. Either side of it. Yes, because it will block the vitamin D absorption, right? But skin health is very important as well too. So we don't want to burn, but we don't want to block the sun at all costs. So it's that happy medium of getting the vitamin D, but also maintaining healthy skin and not burning. So depends on your skin type. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And so since you've been eating healthier and the omega, yeah. So the healthy fats and different antioxidants in our body are really good at fighting off sun damage. And so there's lots of times where people will start taking a supplement like a 365 or or just eating healthier in general. They don't see themselves sunburn as often, which is just another fascinating perk of healthy lifestyle. Yeah.
That's really interesting.
I've noticed that myself.
365
Mhm.
for a long time now, and 6 years anyway. I don't burn anymore. No, I never use sunscreen unless it's like I go to the beach or something new.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
always use it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cool.
fast do you think inflammation can happen if you eat the wrong?
Can happen.
How fast do you think?
Well, immediate for sure. If you bring in, a sugar or a processed food, that's going to cause inflammation. To when it turns into chronic inflammation, that's a good question. I don't have a great answer for you. I mean, it could be, a week of that is gonna continue it, but it's gonna be as long as you're doing those things, I guess would be the right answer.
I can eat too much sugar or too
Mhm.
much chocolate, and I can have inflammation in my joints in a day. Or so.
Yep.
Is that
Yep.
right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I hear that with dairy and gluten all the time. Yep. I wake up the next day and my knees hurt. I hear it all the time. That's your body telling you.
So does that mean you're on the verge of having a lot of inflammation, or is that just common if you don't have any inflammation? If you just
Probably depends on the person. Some people are going to it depends how you react to those foods too. If you have more inflammation or more of an inflammatory response than somebody next to you, it just totally depends on the person.
you think green peppers are bad?
So yeah, nightshades are a common question. I see some people affected by them. Lots of times it's more of the autoimmune people that are really hyper responsive to a lot of foods that might be inflammatory causing. So certain vegetables have anti-nutrients in them, some more than others, and the nightshades can have some of those anti-nutrients that bothers people. So I have people go based on what they feel symptom-wise.
About potatoes?
Same kind of idea. I'm fine with potatoes. Most people can handle them just fine, and that's more of a blood sugar thing that I would focus on is how much potatoes are we eating, what's that doing to our blood sugar, rather than necessarily inflammation. But no, it's not a bad food.
What's your feeling on like non-GMO foods or GMO versus GMO?
I'd prefer organic as much as possible, especially with the Dirty Dozen. I don't know if anybody's really heard of that list. So there's 12 foods that come out every year that are the most sprayed with herbicides, pesticides, and chemicals. And so those are always kind of what we aim to be organic. Lots of times that's leafy greens and berries. Strawberry happens to be number one, like every year. Leafy greens, berries, and then really thin skinned fruits are often sprayed the most, which makes sense. They don't have a shell to protect them. So those would be the biggest ones.
So of all of the popular diets now in the culture,
Mhm.
there's a carnivore diet,
Mhm.
there's a keto diet, there's all kinds of different diets.
Mhm.
What would you suggest would be a better diet if someone was dealing with inflammation or leaky gut?
So anti-inflammatory diet would be my favorite place to start. So keto can be good, can work wonders for certain people. Other people, their body can't handle it at all. So just in general, I mean, all diets are very much dependent on the patient. Anti-inflammatory seems to work the best across the board. So that's kind of why I was talking on it. So there's different diets that I work on with patients, but it depends on what's going on with them, what their results say. But anti-inflammatory diet would definitely be my go-to. Yeah, for anything chronic inflammation. Yeah.
So yogurt, if it's got sugar in it, does that completely wipe out the good part?
It won't take away the good bacteria, but it will add in an inflammatory part, yeah. So if people are going to do yogurt, ideally it's 100% grass-fed, no sugar added or sugar added. And then I have people add maple syrup or honey, so to sweeten it themselves instead of having the sugar that's already in there. And then you could add fruit or whatever to flavor it up. But yeah, it's best to sweeten it yourself with a maple syrup or a honey, which is far better than, yeah, processed sugar.
You talked about kombucha.
Mhm.
How much of that would you have to have in the day for it to benefit?
Right. Yeah. I have some people where they tell me they take a swig of kombucha a day and that's their probiotics. I'm like, it's probably not going to get you exact. Yeah. So a half a cup to one of those servings would be great. I usually do half a serving, and that's one of my servings of probiotic foods. Yeah.
Isn't there a lot of sugar in kombucha?
Some can. Yeah. So others will do the fermentation process with honey, which would be ideal. And then others will use fruit as the sugar source. So GT's, I think, is one of the cleaner ones. That's very common. GT's Synergy is what people see all over the place, and they're one of my favorite brands, and they taste really good. Yeah, but there can be lots of times sugars added.
Like the leaky gut, is that a long-term, healing process?
Mhm.
Like years or longer?
Depends on the damage, depends on, how strict somebody's going to be to try and heal it. It really depends on those two things. But no, you can see, I've seen changes in 2 months And yeah, yep.
How's the comprehensive blood test compared to like a rainbow that the doctor would recommend?
So, like lots of times when you go in for your annual physical or whatever it might be, they'll do a CBC and a CMP. Maybe sometimes you'll get a cholesterol panel. And I do all those. Those give lots of great information, but I add in more inflammatory markers, toxicity markers, full iron panel, different vitamin levels, adrenal markers, full thyroid panel, and then yeah, that seems to be kind of my main panel. We can dive into other things like autoimmune markers, metabolic health, all kinds of things, and that's kind of the yeah big difference. So we're going to add more to test. Yep.
Along with that, don't you have to almost ask for those specifically if you want to know
Yeah.
what they're doing?
Yep.
I mean, blood test, you say, I need this.
Yep.
type of blood test.
Yep.
They're not gonna do it, I don't think, in most cases. That's
Correct.
just
Correct. Yep.
recently.
Yep. Yeah, you got to ask for it, and it's often not covered
in the
by
law.
insurance. Yeah.
Does the insurance cover the testing you do?
No, there's no insurance in my office. They do not cover what I do. And yeah, unfortunate, but that,
You said you do all those blood tests in your office?
yep. So I send people to LabCorp, but I put the order in and they show up. Yeah.
I'm from Kelowna, so
Okay.
driving up here for this, would you do a phone consultation for 20 minutes?
Yeah. Yep. So I can do phone. I'll do the free version we can do, or the free visit I can do phone, virtual, or in person. And then if you decided to be a patient, I can always do virtual visits. I would never do like an initial visit on the phone just so we can see each other. It's a lot better. But yeah, virtual is absolutely an option.
So back to the gluten, even organic bread and stuff still has gluten, right?
Mhm.
So it qualifies
Mhm. Yeah.
organic part.
Yeah. And that's definitely better than, getting Wonder Bread off the shelves. So there's lots of people that can handle fully sprouted, fully organic, whole wheat gluten. It's still gluten and it has that inflammatory aspect, but it's far, far, far better than processed white bread. That processed white bread and those bread type foods and those pastas will spike blood sugar more than like just tossing back a teaspoon or a spoonful of sugar. They digest so quickly and are so inflammatory. So yeah.
And then the gentleman asked about non-GMO. Does that mean anything at all on what we're looking at,
For gluten or just in general?
just in general?
Yeah, non-GMO is good. It's definitely something to work towards, especially with soy products. Those seem to, it's like tofu and different things like that. I always have people aim for non-GMO or organic because those are very processed and GMO'd. And so people with organic soy, it seems to be they respond much better than if they have the GMO'd version. Yeah. Yeah.
I've had problems for many years, 30 years with my
Mhm.
constipation.
Mhm.
Does the gut ever wear out to a point where it would just?
It's never going to work again?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. No.
I've had one of my doctors says, I think your just muscles have given out.
Yeah, no.
Wore out.
The body's smart. It's always
Yeah,
working to try and get back. Yeah. Yep.
Right?
If your intestinal cells were all dead, then you're probably never going to go to the bathroom and you're never going to digest anything and you'd have much more problems. But yeah, that's not usually the case. Yeah.
So
Oh,
how
it's
does
totally fine.
the follow-up, when you do
Mhm.
that detour and
Yep.
the blood exams and what have
Mhm.
you,
Mhm.
and you get started on the process,
Yeah. So
does one have to come?
yeah. So it depends on the patient, of course, but after we go over all the results together, I often meet with patients 4 or 6 weeks down the road because when there's lots of lifestyle changes involved, it's usually good to touch base, what's working, what's not working, what can we tweak, what can we improve, and all those different things. And then after that, it really depends on the patient. I have some that like to talk to me every month, and then I have other people that I can talk to 4 months down the road. Oftentimes we repeat testing 5, 6 months down the road to see what progress we're making and where we can continue to improve all those different things. But there's no payment programs or programs you have to sign up for or anything. It's all, again, individualized to the patient and their needs and what's going on with them.
So you can tell whether you're gluten intolerant or celiac or whatever by these tests?
The blood panel does not test for that. If you wanted to check for celiac, those are different markers. We can always add them onto the panel. They just aren't in my normal panel. And gluten sensitivity would be different. That's kind of more of that sensitivity route where it's okay. It's just not totally reliable. So it's just better in general to avoid it, as much as possible. Not, I never expect 100% of the time, but yeah.
You mentioned early on, you said that you came off of your soccer
Mhm.
or your, was it soccer?
Yep, yep.
That you became completely
Fatigued.
fatigued?
Yep.
What did you do right away that you helped?
So kind of what did I discover? Yeah. So I had major adrenal issues, which is very much cortisol, and we need cortisol for energy. So that made sense. And then I also found out I had parasites. So I was chronically inflamed in my GI tract, which, like you guys now know, leads to chronic inflammation and can lead to fatigue issues too. So probably a combination of the both.
You're my
Mm,
Well,
10?
I didn't
10?
mean to embarrass you.
10-ish? No, yeah, no.
It's been a while.
Yeah, no. Yeah, 10 years, yeah, probably. So yeah, I've been on this journey for a very long time.
Okay.
And there's usually a personal story that brings you in, and I have one too.
So on the acid, if you're taking a PPI and that seems to solve your problem, is that a high acid indication? Because you said, sometimes it's low.
Sometimes it's low, yeah. So it could be both, but kind of the idea behind the acid is we suppress it because we think we have too much because we feel it. We feel it in our chest, we feel it in our mouth, whatever it might be. But acid should actually trigger that sphincter between your esophagus and your stomach to close. So sometimes if we don't have enough acid, then that sphincter won't close. And so that's what leads to it going up into our esophagus and we think we have too much. So if you suppress it completely, then you're not going to get any that even goes up into your esophagus. So you won't have those symptoms. So could be a high acid problem. It's not always not, but it could also be a low acid problem. And it's really about helping the body produce the correct amount of acid, but then also healing the esophagus and the stomach.
So what closes that splinter that you're talking?
Sphincter, yeah.
The acid that closes?
Yep. That's what should trigger the closure. Yep. So that's why lots of times when there's not enough, it's not closing it. Yeah. The body's smart. It knows what it's supposed to do. And
For that, for people that problems that splinter,
yeah, or a hiatal hernia. Yep.
that what
Sometimes.
What are the risks with the PPIs?
So if we're not getting any protein, that can lead to all sorts of issues, bone issues, hormone issues. I see it with hormone bone, and then also hormone boners. What am I thinking of? Yes, yeah, liver health because we need a lot of protein for detoxification purposes. I mean, all across the board too, because we just make everything with protein. Yeah, so neurological tissue issues would be common as well too. And then we aren't getting B12, and B12 is absolutely vital to all kinds of different processes in our body, energy, brain health, hormones, all those different things. Yeah.
Once they close that valve, my son had that done,
hmm
and then it causes other.
hmm Yeah. Yeah. So that's where we got to get to the root, what's going on, what's causing all the symptoms in the first place, and do we need to heal?
Sounds pretty radical.
I know. Crazy thought process.
Can you share at all what some of the costs might be? So kind of
Yeah,
budget
for sure.
things?
Yeah, absolutely. So my hourly rate is $250, and that first visit where we sit down and go over your whole history is hour and a half, but I just charge $250. Some people go over, some people don't. The comprehensive blood panel is often $250 as well. Again, we can add on things, but the average is $250. And then to go over all the results together, $250 again, takes about an hour and a half. And then supplements totally vary. And if we have check-ins down the road, it's based on that hourly rate of $250. So 15-minute check-ins or 30-minute check-ins, whatever they might be. Yeah, of course.
So when you have a patient that's eaten poorly for 70 years, that's going to be probably.
Yeah, I see it all the time. And it is the biggest obstacle for a lot of people, but it's a journey and we make changes overnight. Or we make changes each day. We don't make all those changes overnight one time. And so it's a team effort always between me and them. I'm always asking for progress and for trying to make changes and all those different things. And it absolutely takes time. I still tweak things. And again, I've been doing this for 10 years and working on myself for 10 years. And you continue to always to better yourselves and learn things that are better and make tweaks. Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't expect perfection.